Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Norton, founder of People Plus Purpose and your host on the Truth Behind Dentistry podcast. And in this episode, I am thrilled to have Iris Wedeking as my guest. Iris is the CEO and co-founder of Identical. She also has deep expertise in business management and marketing from her experience building major brands at the Clorox Company, as well as managing operations for 3 dental implant centers prior to founding Identical. Iris holds an MBA from UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business and a BA from Tufts University. She lives in Walnut Creek, California, which I had a brother that lived there for quite a while, and her dentist husband and 3 children. Welcome to the podcast, Iris.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I just want to say that we had a previous recent conversation where we chatted about a lot of these things that we're going to talk about in this next little window of time. And I loved the conversation. I think what you're doing is amazing and important. Um, and I'm excited to bring it to our viewers. And even as we were just chatting, to kind of forecast what's coming, even invite our viewers to participate in helping bring to fruition what we believe is coming. And just talking about this whole idea of creating something and breathing life into it for a while before it actually comes to full existence. So I find that an exhilarating whole kind of idea as to how that happens. So let's talk. We're going to talk about dental implants, especially. Um, so Identical introduces a paradigm shift in implant dentistry. So I guess what I would like is for you to share a little bit about historically some of the challenges of implant dentistry and and as a result of that, why you believe we as a whole need to kind of rethink about how dental implants are designed, how they're placed, and just that whole process. So somewhere in there, kick it off for us.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so as many of our viewers probably know, the current paradigm for implant dentistry involves a drill and screw approach, where the patient needs to undergo a drilling process. An osteotomy is drilled into the site where the implant needs to be placed, and then an implant, which is basically a cylindrical titanium screw, is screwed into that spot. And because the current paradigm involves drilling, there are a whole host of clinical implications for that procedure, and subsequently a whole host of risk mitigation measures, tools, processes, aspects of the workflow that have been introduced to implant dentistry to mitigate the risks that are involved with drilling. And just to name a few, so because you're drilling into the jawbone, there's surgical guides that have been developed. There are drill stops. There's a whole surgical kit required with drills with different diameters and different components to make that surgery as safe and effective as possible. And then, of course, there's a whole inventory of implants required of different lengths and diameters, et cetera, to make sure you're putting the right size of implant in that spot. So all that full armamentarium of surgical tools, equipment, and inventory require, number one, extensive training to learn how to use all of those tools and equipment. And that, of course, requires time and investment, either to get trained as an oral surgeon or a periodontist, where you learn implant dentistry, or for a general dentist, which my husband's a general dentist, so I saw him go through this process. He had to go through hundreds of hours of training, flying to New York every month for a full year, to get trained in implant dentistry. So that's one key barrier, is getting the training to actually use the full armamentarium effectively. And then, of course, the cost involved with that. There's cost involved when you leave your practice to go get training, and then, of course, investing in all the capital equipment and inventory required. And then finally, I'll say from a clinical perspective, there's obviously a risk to the patient, right? When you're drilling, if you drill too far down and hit the nerve, that can cause nerve injury, and which can lead to paralysis for the patient in worst cases. And there's also, as far as healing time, it takes about 3 to 4 months from the implant or to get an implant, from extraction to implant for delayed placement implants. That's a long time to get your final tooth. typically up to 10 months to get your final tooth. And then the aesthetic outcomes can be compromised from this drilling process, which is actually what led my husband to design this implant. Is he was restoring his own implants and saw that there were some aesthetic challenges in the anterior area, because he calls it a tomato on a stick. You're basically, drilling, putting a screw in there, and then putting a crown on, and a kind of unnatural, that creates an unnatural gingival contour. So a lot of, time and cost for the doctor, risk and time for the patient, and then of course cost for the patient. Because such extensive training is required, very few general dentists in the US place implants today. The data shows about 20% of GPs place implants in the US. So therefore, most patients have to go to a specialist, like an oral surgeon, to get an implant. And we know dental insurance, my husband calls it a dental coupon, doesn't typically have great coverage for implants. So it ends up being very expensive for the patient. And so by making, an implant something that, well, we'll talk in a minute about identical, but my initial impetus to start this company was to create, increased access for implants for patients. So that's a
Yeah,
challenge today.
yeah. And I coach a lot of dentists, a lot of general dentists who, many of them, there's a variety of them that go some distance into placing implants, maybe particular locations in the mouth, but not comfortable everywhere. Certainly associates that get brought into those practices, some are drawn to the possibility and to learn and develop that skill set. Others are very much intimidated by that, and I don't really want to do that. So I hope you're not expecting that of me if I practice here. So that does seem like it's a steep curve there, to your mountain to climb, I guess, to be able to participate. And the problem from your perspective, I think, as we chatted before, is how many people need access to this, and yet there's not enough people to effectively, cost effectively deliver them, right?
Correct. Exactly. I think from the patient perspective, there's the cost, there's a time, and there's certainly a fear and anxiety factor. As we all know, I've been living with a dentist for over 20 years, so I know that most people do not love going to the dentist, much less, having a drill, going into their job. And yes, there is sedation available, of course, and all those things are available. But I can tell you that we get a lot of patients who are contacting us through our website with zero marketing, to be honest, who are saying, drill free, sign me up. I'm so scared of this implant procedure. When can I get access to your drill free procedure? So there is the fear and anxiety factor as well, but of course, access to care is another one. So just the price and the cost involved is a barrier for many patients.
Yeah. So I guess that leads us right into why identical then. What is it that's unique about this product that has you so excited?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, my husband's a dentist and a general dentist, and he's been placing implants for over 20 years. And so he came up with the original idea to create a patient-specific drill-free dental implant using 3D imaging technologies. I came in and decided to take the technology and run and bring it to market. And what we're doing is we're basically using a scan of the extracted tooth root to design a customized implant. So post-extraction, the doctor scans the tooth root, and then they send us that scanned file, and then we use that scan to design the patient-specific implant. So we have some special patented design features and a design process we use, and then we send that file to a 3D printer, and I can show on the camera.
Yeah.
We 3D print a titanium patient-specific one-piece dental implant that within 6 days of the extraction can be shipped right back to the dentist, and any dentist in the world can simply press the implant right back into the native socket site where the original tooth was. And literally that's all it takes. It's about 30 seconds. They can press it in, and then we have a simple mallet to give it a few taps, and your implant is placed.
Oh,
So truly, if you can take a tooth out, you can place our implants. And that's the beauty of it. It's that simple, and it's I can go into all the benefits, but at
yeah.
the core of it, it's a simple, less invasive, faster, and safer procedure that any dentist can easily provide to their patients.
Yeah, a custom fit. I mean, what a novel concept, right? I mean, to me that it's like it's revolutionary to have to come up with that when that hasn't existed really. But then the thought of maybe how has it not existed maybe yet up to this point, or even more of an urgent drive to how are we going to make this custom? Because in the absence of that custom fit, say a little bit more about what has to happen, kind of like we're trying to, force our foot into a poorly fitting shoe or something. I don't know what the proper analogy would be, but
Yeah. Well, in the absence of patient-specific implants, we have the screw thread, right? Just the standard cylindrical titanium screws that we've had for 58 years, which is why drilling is required, right? Because it's just it's a round screw. So yeah, so that is the beauty of a patient-specific implant. And it's interesting that everything else in dentistry today is patient-specific except for implants. So it's time. I think, the industry has already moved to digital workflows, and for the, 3D imaging is here, 3D printing is here. So basically all the technologies that Identical is using have been around, for the last 5-10 years, but nobody's used them in this way. And we think it's time to bring dentistry and to bring implant dentistry, into the next phase with patient-specific implants. There are other body parts, by the way, that have patient-specific implants, just not in the mouth yet.
yeah.
So it's time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's awesome. So maybe you could elaborate just a little bit on some of the various benefits. There's a range of things that become easier, I mean, how does that affect cost potential,
Mhm.
ease of access? What are some of the things that you say once this occurs, and it's going to occur, right? I mean, this is going to occur. Uh, what can people expect, and what could once that exists, how will we see the benefits?
Sure. So from a clinician's perspective, we'll start with the doctor and then go to the
Mhm.
patient.
Okay.
So from the clinician's perspective, for the GP, the general dentist who is not placing implants today, we talked before about all the training required to learn how to use that full armamentarium, how to use the surgical kits, and how to basically do the drilling procedure. So all of that training is eliminated from the process. So like I said, if you can extract a tooth, which every dentist should learn that in dental
Mhm.
school, then you can place our implants. It's that simple. So for the GP, we remove the whole time and cost required with training. And then as far as the investment and all the equipment, the surgical kits, the inventory, all that investment is eliminated entirely. So you truly just need the implant itself, and then we do have a small kit with the mallet to give it a few taps and it's in. So the capital investment you do need an intraoral scanner and access to a CBCT image. So those things you do need, but most offices these days have those two things.
Mhm.
So it's just, time and cost savings for the dentist, and then the actual procedure itself, as far as chair time, takes about 5 minutes to place our
Wow.
implants,
Wow.
including anesthesia. The actual insertion is like about 30 seconds. So it's a huge economic benefit for the dentist to be able to save that chair time and be more productive, every hour. And then it introduces a new tool they have in their toolkit, right? To be able to place implants and add that service to their patients is a huge benefit. And then obviously in the actual insertion process, we remove the risk to the doctor, right? So there's no risk of causing nerve damage. You're literally just pressing it into the native socket site. You can't the doctor who did our first in human clinical study in Brazil told us that you have to try really hard to make a mistake with our implants. And in fact, he said he would give he's the vice dean of the dental school at University of Sao Paulo School of Dentistry. And he said he would give this implant to a first year dental student, no problem.
Wow.
No concerns, no issues, because it's
Wow.
really that simple and easy.
Yeah, that's great.
Um,
You know, perchance what the statistics are on how often there are complications, there are injuries in
mhm.
given how we currently approach it?
Yeah, so literature, I have done some research on that, and the literature that I found showed a 13% incidence of nerve injury in the mandibular tooth positions. So it is a real risk, and it's certainly something that we all need to be aware of. So yeah, it's great
It-
to be able to remove that risk entirely
yeah.
from the equation for both the dentist and the patient.
And even maybe beyond a true injury standpoint, there are probably complications or difficulties and requiring subsequent visits sometimes to make it right. Is that true?
Exactly. Exactly. So while there are surgical guides and tools to mitigate risk, but still there is human error that occurs. So you need to know how to use those tools appropriately. And there can be error in when you're placing the implant in terms of the angulation, the depth. So there's certainly a lot of risk mitigation measures out there. I won't say that doesn't exist, but there's certainly more room for error and risk with traditional implants, whereas with our implant, we remove that almost entirely from the equation. So,
That's
um,
great. That's
yeah.
great. So also before we get into the patient side benefit, what about things like when bone grafting has been
Mhm.
either stated to be required or
Yep.
recommended before an implant is done? Uh, how does that relate to this approach? Is that
Mhm.
still equally needed then? Um, or are there times where maybe with this approach, one might not always as often have to have a bone graft?
Sure. So of course it will be a case by case. Every patient is different. This implant is designed in this current version for fresh extraction sites. So the implant is placed within 6 days of the extraction. So in most cases, patients should have sufficient bone for the implant to be placed without any bone grafting required. If the patient does need any bone grafting, there's no reason why a doctor couldn't use bone graft material with our implant. And our first in our clinical trial that we're doing to get through the FDA, because of the FDA's regulations, we're not using bone graft material in this clinical study, but there's nothing that would prevent a doctor from using that if they think it's the best option for the patient. So it will really, it'll depend case by case if the patient
Yeah,
needs it or not, but in most cases it should be. We design the implant to fit the socket site perfectly, so it
right.
fills the entire socket,
Yeah.
with the implant itself as a
Kind of
design.
what I was thinking, that maybe if we're not doing all the drilling,
Mhm.
then maybe there's more latitude there, maybe not always requiring that
Exactly.
grafting. Okay. All right. Well, shall we shift and talk about
Patient.
for patients? Yes.
Sure, absolutely. And before we do that, I'll just mention for the specialist who is already placing implants today, we have an oral surgeon on our board. He was one of our first investors, and we've talked to many other specialists, oral surgeons and periodontists, who, even though they're all very proficient in implant surgery as it exists today, and they already have the full armamentarium of surgical tools and equipment, many of them see huge benefits in our technology because they don't have to worry about having all the instruments and the equipment and the inventory, ready for any implant case with our technology. So it obviously just simplifies the system required for those cases. They may still do traditional implants in their practice, but at least they know when they have an identical case, the time to set up and break down and making sure everything is working properly. You don't have to have any of that kind of headache or getting a surgical guide made in advance and the surgical planning is removed. So there are significant time and cost savings for dentists who are already placing implants. Not to mention the chair time is always a benefit, and the outcomes. We haven't talked about the fact that our implant should heal much faster than traditional implants.
Mhm.
So the osseointegration time period, should be much shorter because we're not drilling away any of the native bone. So there's no bone remodeling process required. We'll prove that out in future clinical studies to validate that claim, but all the experts we've talked to believe that our implant should integrate much faster and provide better aesthetic outcomes because we're preserving that natural gingival contour. So just want to mention that about the
Yeah,
specialists.
yeah,
We
that's
we
great.
care about them too and think they'll
Right,
benefit as
right,
well.
right.
From the patient perspective, we talked about number one, safety, right? So there's no risk of causing any nerve injury. It's much faster. So with delayed placement implants today, you get an extraction, you may get bone grafting, and then you have to wait about 4 months for the implant or before you can actually get your implant placed, right? During that 4 months, the bone basically fills that space so you can drill a fresh hole in that site. So we remove that, we reduce that 4 months down to 6 days. So it's much faster for the patient to get their implant. Once they get the implant, it should heal much faster and then with better aesthetic outcomes.
Mhm.
And I think probably the most exciting thing is that if every dentist is placing implants or many more general dentists are placing implants, then they should have easier access to getting this care. And we expect the price should decrease for patients with many, many more general dentists placing implants, just the supply demand
Right,
economics.
right, makes sense.
The cost should decrease for patients. So those are the key benefits for
Yeah.
patients.
Yeah, that and the supply and demand element, but then also the fact that it will take less time and less work, right, to
Yeah,
do it, and
yeah,
less overhead costs with all those other things you're saying of time and tools and all of that. So to me, that makes sense that the price would be down. So of
yeah,
course,
exactly.
obviously there's more factors about pricing than
Yeah,
we're accounting for maybe, but it makes perfect sense to me. So
yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
great. So I'm excited about this. I think this is technology that is due, and and I know that many like the next question that comes up for you is, so when can I sign up? Because I think I even said that to you right when we first spoke. It's like, no,
Yeah,
you have to wait a little bit until we get through our proving
yeah.
phase. So do you want to say anything about that process that you have to go through? And then I would love for you to share a little bit about, um, what this, as far as a startup like this and investments and, and then ultimately how can our viewers get involved if they would like to, but maybe say something a little bit about what this process is like for you to go through.
Sure, sure. So this is an implantable medical device, basically. So the FDA has certain steps we have to get through before we can, get this to the market and get FDA clearance. So the next step for us is to do a large pivotal clinical study here in the US. So we have already treated 12 patients in our first in human trial in Brazil. And by the way, we had a 100% success rate with those first 12 patients, and we followed them out to 12 months post-loading. So that was quite exciting and meaningful for us.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So next is to do a larger study here in the US, and we need to treat over 100 patients here in the US and follow them out to 12 months post-loading, and then provide that data to the FDA. So it is a step-by-step process, and that is what's required. And we're excited to move forward with that next step.
When does this next phase that's going to require 12 months, when does that begin?
Yeah, so we've actually already started that trial back in December of
Okay.
last year. We treated our first patient, and there is kind of a phased approach the FDA requires. So they want us to treat 10 patients first, and then press pause after a certain time point, show them the data, and then if the FDA is comfortable with what they see, then they'll let us expand the full study. So it is a step-by-step process, but we did already start treating those first 10 patients, and we're thrilled with the results that we're seeing so far.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. That's awesome. So as far as this kind of startup investing process, what's necessary to make all this genius work come to fruition, tell us a little bit about the process, and maybe a little bit about what's needed in your specific case. What are you looking for? How could people get involved?
Sure, sure. Thank you. So this does require capital to conduct these clinical trials and to get the product to market. So we're currently right now in the middle of a financing round. So we're raising 2 million to support treating those first 10 patients in this US clinical trial. We've already closed 1.6 million, so we only have about 400,000 left, but there's still some time to get in if anyone listening wants to take part in this round. And I will say this is likely the last round where we'll have a significant discount to basically the share price, or the price to get equity in the company. So it's a convertible note is the name of the instrument we're using.
Mhm.
Um, and so it does have a discount involved. So basically anyone who invests in this round, when we raise our next round, which will be what's called a price round, well, there'll be a price per share that's determined by the lead investor. Then any investor who invests now will basically, their investment will convert to equity at a discounted price.
Okay,
So it's basically a good deal
right.
for any investor to get in at an earlier stage as far as their price per share. And then, of course, as most people probably know, eventually we expect to exit and get acquired by probably a large strategic in this space. And so any investor, who gets in early now, should expect to have a nice outcome once we exit the company, which we know this is a highly commoditized, highly undifferentiated and competitive space. And we know that the large strategic companies will be, very interested in what we're doing
Yeah,
once we get
they
FDA
will.
clearance. So
Yeah.
the opportunity is to, we're taking investments now, and the minimum investment amount is 25,000. And we would really love to get more dentists and dental industry folks involved, not only to invest, but also to provide feedback and input as we continue on our path forward. There's a lot of innovation that we can do. What I showed you is just the very beginning,
Okay.
and provides a really strong foundation for more innovation to come, which we will be investing in that innovation over the next few years. So we're excited to get dentists involved on
Yeah.
both fronts.
Yeah, that is exciting. So this current financing round for this kind of extra benefit for viewers is likely to last about how much longer, would you say?
Well, depends on if we fill it faster, then we'll close the round faster.
Today. It's going to end
I
today,
think
midnight tonight.
I anticipate the next few weeks. So it's February 1st today. I would say, by the end of February, we should be closing the round. So now's the time. Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. Um, I'm curious also, is there anything else more that you want to share? They had kind of one more question and something I'd love for you to kind of share whatever you'd like about it. But before I kind of shift the topic a little bit, is there anything relative? Oh, I don't know what I was going to say too, is I love the name Identical. I mean, that's perfect, right? Did,
Thank you.
did you come up with that or your
No, I
husband?
can't take credit for that. We have a friend who came up
Oh,
with it when we
okay.
were in the early stages.
Yeah,
We have a friend who's very creative and came up with a name, so I
yeah,
can't take credit, but
yeah.
we like it too.
Yeah, I like it too. So at first, when I was first being introduced to you, it was like identical. I wonder why they named it that. Oh, I know why.
Yeah.
So anything else that you'd like to share about identical, about this process, about anything that I didn't ask you or we didn't cover before I shift slightly for a few minutes?
Sure. No, I would just say to the viewers, if you're interested in what we're doing, either as an investor or potentially an advisor, or just to provide input or feedback, or you want to be on the list for when we get ready to launch and market, we welcome involvement from the dental industry and dentists, and would love to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out. I'm sure you'll have my contact info.
Now, why don't you go ahead and
Oh,
since we're on that, go ahead and share the best way for them to reach you.
Oh, sure. So just my first name, Iris, looks like Iris, pronounced Iris, at identicalimplant.com. So all one word, identicalimplant.com. So feel free to reach out to me directly. Happy to talk. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I just had, in knowing that you have a lot of other background experience,
Mhm.
you had shared a little bit about what you've accomplished before, and I'm just kind of interested about key lessons learned, or even how that applies into this whole identical process, because you founded and scaled a national organization that's now in its 24th year of operation with over 130 chapters in 44 states, which I think that's a major accomplishment. So I felt like I was being remiss if I didn't bring that up. And I'd love to hear about about that experience and what you've learned from that.
Sure. So I think that earlier entrepreneurial experience and building and scaling Kesem, which um, is a nationwide network of camps for kids who have a parent with cancer. So totally different space.
Yeah,
However, similar kind of process as far as identifying a major unmet need in the world, and then building a scalable model to meet that need. And I think that's what kind of drives me as a human being, is just finding ways to make an impact at scale in the world. And so I think when I started Kesem, the nonprofit, I was in my early 20s and had no idea how to build and scale an organization, but was very fortunate to surround myself with an amazing team of people. And I think a lot of leaders probably say this, but it's true for me for sure, that surrounding myself with people who had the skills and experience that I didn't have, but believed in the vision and were willing to work together to achieve that vision, is, I think, how Kesem got to be where it is today, 24 years later. And I think with Identical, we've been at this for about 5 years now, and we talked earlier about just creation and how to
right,
create anything from scratch, from the ground up, people have to believe,
right.
and you have to have a lot of different skill sets and different capabilities to build anything from the ground up. And so I would say, I took a similar approach with Identical as I did with Kesem very early on. I'm not a dentist, I'm not an engineer. I'm kind of a second time founder, but haven't been a CEO in the med tech space or dental industry. And so I just immediately surrounded myself with people who have those skills and experience. And I think that's how we've gotten to where we are today with, a fully developed product that's, being validated in clinical trials. So I have a lot of gratitude for all the people who have believed in this idea and have contributed to our success.
That's great. Well, I wanted you to be able to speak to that because I think it speaks to your heart, your vision, your heart for why you're doing what you're doing. And there's all sorts of utilitarian, transactional reasons why people could want to be investors in identical, and you'd be happy to have people get involved no matter their values or their motivation, probably. But I thought, people love to support, people love to collaborate, be a part of things when people have a vision and a heart for something that really is a meaningful contribution. So I felt like that's something that I wanted you to give a chance to, because I got that feel from you when we spoke, and I wanted our viewers to know that a little bit more about you in that regard as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I would say when people ask me like what keeps me going every day, because it is a process to build
Yeah.
and run a startup and to get through all these phases. And I would say two things keep me going. One is the people around me, this amazing team that I mentioned earlier, but also the vision and the mission of what we're doing is ultimately to democratize access to dental implants and to a tooth replacement option that any patient can get access to worldwide. So I think we talked before about how my husband and I did some mountaineering in developing countries, and thinking about all the edentulous people worldwide, not only in the U.S. Of course, many are here, but worldwide, and just the idea that this technology could eventually serve millions of patients worldwide who are suffering from tooth loss, and we know the impact on quality of life and health and diet, nutrition if you don't have your teeth, mental health, etc. So that drives me, just knowing that this technology I know has the ability to have a huge impact, and I want to be part of that solution. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's how I feel. That's a lot of what drives my heart for why I do what I do, to make a difference in that regard. And so I wanted to be able to bring that to people. So thank you for sharing
Thank you.
that. Thank you so much for what you're doing and for taking the time to be on with me today. And I'm just trusting that there are many people that are watching and or listening to us that are saying, that sounds intriguing. I would like to know more. I might like to want to invest. And so I just want to encourage everybody that is in that category at all to reach out and speak with you, and at least take a step to learn more about this. So
Great.
appreciate your time in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So for everybody watching, yes, reach out to Erie's, learn more about this opportunity. I thank you for watching the Truth Behind Dentistry podcast. And I think we did speak to some truths today, and some changes that are coming as a result of these truths. And appreciate your support. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you.